Hello.
Welcome back to the Space School, otherwise known as PPSW, your favorite hangout place. Today we're back with another Star Wars story. Today we'll discover what would have happened had Obi-Wan Kenobi trained Ahsoka Tano. She was originally meant to be his student, so how would he have taught her and how would it affect the rest of galactic history? Before we begin this video, special thanks to our patrons, voice actors, and everyone else a part of the Pente Patrol team. If you want a chance to win in our next giveaway, watch to the end of the video and I'll tell you exactly how you can win. Our story begins on the battlefront of Christophsis. The battle has been tense, but the Republic was getting a strong foothold on the planet. The battlefront had seen much diversity and adversity. Firstly, the Republic had to break through Admiral Trench's blockade, which was tough as anything the Republic had faced in these first few months of combat. It was just enough to get the soldiers on the ground, including Senator Bail Organa the necessary reinforcements that they needed. Shortly after the Republic set up defenses, they were betrayed by one of their own, Sergeant Click, who set off explosives detonating a majority of the clones' armor. At the same moment, Obi-Wan and Anakin on the other side of the city engaged in a duel with Asajj Ventress, which led them to discovering a massive droid army which was being deployed on the planet. They were about to make conflict with the Republic and make anything on Christophsis much more difficult. Admiral Yularen and the rest of the Republic fleet had been essentially routed from the planet, but they were able to get a shuttle down to the planet before they retreated. The shuttle wasn't exactly what the Jedi needed, especially not after a long day of combat. The two Jedi generals, under the cover of their heavy guns, 3 artillery cannons to be specific, were able to rout the Seppies from the battlefield. It wouldn't last long, but the hopes of reinforcements, the Jedi assumed that the shuttle would bring them more than just a Padawan. Her name was Ahsoka Tano. She was requested by Obi-Wan, though he wasn't entirely sure why they would send her to him in the middle of a battlefield. Ahsoka came to them with information regarding something or another, but Obi-Wan was more concerned with why they would send her here and now. Ahsoka looked to be a youngling. His assumption wasn't far off. She was extremely young to be leaving her class. It showed how she had so much potential. Obi-Wan and Anakin would come to take information from her and then immediately relay information back off of Christophsis through Admiral Yularen, who dropped her off, back to the Jedi on Coruscant. Obi-Wan would request for reinforcements from the Jedi Temple, considering that's what they needed previously, especially since Click blew up most of their armor. The two Jedi didn't have any time for worrying about reinforcements now. They needed to get themselves prepared for another droid assault. Commander Cody was informing them about the droid forces preparing themselves up for a counterattack. There was so much going on, Ahsoka's head was spinning. Of course, being a Jedi was hard, but a 13-year-old on a battlefront was overwhelming to say the least. Obi-Wan's warm and peaceful welcome was calming though, and his former apprentice, Anakin, seemed to be a little off or different, though that wasn't Ahsoka's concern. She was with Kenobi after all. He would be her master, and the one to help her see her way to knighthood. As for now, she stuck to his hip. Obi-Wan was leading this defense. As the master of defensive combat, it made perfect sense for him to be leading the defense on Christophsis. Anakin, on the other hand, went with Captain Rex away from the front lines and prepared for anything the droids might throw at them. Obi-Wan, on the other hand, went through the basics that he could help his new student with. It was a very rudimentary, to be frank, but it was an introduction to the battlefield and everything she needed to know. Obi-Wan was very formal, but he was Obi-Wan after all. Obi-Wan introduced Ahsoka to Commander Cody and many of the other higher-ranking clones within the army that Kenobi led. He was the Jedi General of the 212th Legion. The 7th Sky Corps also came under his control, but currently the 212th was present on Christophsis. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka got well acquainted way off early. He could tell she was a bit like Skywalker. Her calm and loose demeanor proved to be to him that he would have a little bit more of a challenging student on his hands, but she couldn't be anything like Anakin. Ahsoka had the opportunity to be trained inside the Jedi Temple since birth, unlike Anakin. She would be very much so a Jedi with rebellious tendencies, something Obi-Wan knew he would be able to handle. Anakin was almost torture for Obi-Wan to take on as an apprentice after just being a Padawan. Obi-Wan had the opportunity to train Anakin, and he was now a high member of the High Council. Obi-Wan was an experienced Jedi Master at this point, surrounded by the greatest masters in the entire Jedi Order. It also helped that he knew Master Plo Koon, the master who brought Ahsoka to the Jedi Temple originally. Ahsoka spoke quietly. She wasn't exactly outspoken. She listened to what Obi-Wan had to say, but Obi-Wan could feel that there were multiple times that she wanted to talk. So when Obi-Wan finished showing her around the defenses and the clones, and just about everything she needed to know about basic commanding etiquette, he asked her what she would like to share. She told her master that it was a bit overwhelming. Obi-Wan of course understood. He asked her what he could do to make things easier for her. It was hard for a Padawan to be on the front lines. Again, she was just 13, 2 years younger than the average Padawan coming out of the Jedi Temple. Ahsoka told Obi-Wan that she didn't know, she just wanted to be the best student that she could. But there was a lot of information that she just took in, alongside the fact that they were on a battlefield, that she just didn't want to disappoint her new master by accidentally making the wrong decision. Obi-Wan placed his hand on her shoulder and told her that as a Jedi, it was their duty to be leaders. There would always be moments of indecision and failure, but Ahsoka needed to remember that failure was only a point of view. Ahsoka perked her head up as Obi-Wan continued to tell her that when he was a Padawan, his master died. It was right after that he skipped knighthood and became the teacher of Anakin Skywalker. Obi-Wan continued telling Ahsoka that there were several times as a young instructor that he failed. Several times where he as a master felt incapable, or as if he could never live up to being the master that Qui-Gon was. But one day, he was able to establish a bond with Anakin. He was able to become the teacher that Anakin needed. Sure, he failed to get there, and sure, those failures hurt both Anakin and his own development. But the moment that Obi-Wan learned his failures, and learned that they were opportunities, he realized what it really meant to be a master. He then told Ahsoka that while teaching Anakin, he may have failed several times. But then Kenobi said, he didn't fail several times, he learned how to not teach several times. Obi-Wan told Ahsoka that the mindset of a Jedi needed to not just be positive, but forward-thinking. Once Obi-Wan realized that every failure was a learning opportunity, he could be more of a teacher that Anakin needed him to be. Sometimes there were standoffs, and other times there were hostilities, but it made them better. Obi-Wan continued telling Ahsoka not to fear what hadn't happened. There was no reason for it to control her in the moment, and no need for her to let it change her destiny as a Jedi. Ahsoka smiled, realizing by the calm and even motivating words her master just said to her. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka would continue talking and walking back and forth through the lines as a duo checked in on the wounded and injured to ensure that they were doing alright, before moving back to the front lines as Anakin and Rex approached them. Rex spotted an energy field several clicks north and it was amassing. Obi-Wan assumed that's going to be only one thing, that the Separatists were going to make a push on the Republic. They needed to prepare themselves for this strike, because if they didn't prepare, it could be catastrophic. Ahsoka watched as her master ordered Anakin and Rex to find a way behind enemy lines to turn the shield generator off. In the meantime, Ahsoka, Cody, and him would keep the artillery protected. It was a daring strategy, but the boldness and confidence displayed by General Kenobi was inspiring to the student he now had. Ahsoka stuck to her master's hip as she asked what the plan was. Obi-Wan grinned as he told her to follow him and the clones to a forward position. There, she, they, and all of them would be informed of what they would do. At that forward battle position of the Republic battle line, Obi-Wan told the clones and Ahsoka that it was their job to hold this position, until Anakin and Captain Rex destroyed the shield generator. Ahsoka asked how they would get under the shield when the droids got here. Obi-Wan smiled as he confidently told them to stay hidden under their barricades until the shields passed over them, and then they would jump into attack position. For now, they needed to stay in cover and be patient. Obi-Wan then quieted himself down as he got behind his piece of cover next to his student. She was obviously a bit nervous, but Obi-Wan's calm demeanor kept her in check, and with her own sense of confidence. Within the next coming hour, the clones, Kenobi and Ahsoka, would be under the shield generator. It was apparent that Anakin hadn't gotten to the generator yet, so the men needed to stick it to the droids. As a shield passed over, the clones rose from the ramparts and began to fire down on the Seppies. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka ignited their blue lightsabers as they leaped down in front of the clone forces. Ahsoka stuck close to Obi-Wan as he paved the way forward. The droids didn't expect the assault out of nowhere, and they continued and countered it very poorly. Their foot soldiers stood little to no chance as the Jedi and their troops made their way through the lines, but the heavy tanks were coming up behind under the command of General Loathsome. On the backside of the enemy lines, Anakin and Rex crept through enemy territory, before coming across some destroyer droids. With an obedient trooper, Anakin and Rex ran away from the two destroyer droids as Anakin cut both of the droids into pieces. At that moment, Anakin and Rex realized how close they were to the shield generator. They just needed to get to it so that they could shut it down. On the battlefront, Obi-Wan and Ahsoka cut through the battle droids as B-2 clankers began to crash their way through the small ramparts that the clones had hidden behind. The B-2s were much heavier and they hit with much more force. Ahsoka blocked some blaster fire before Obi-Wan pushed her down into cover. He looked over at Cody across the way and ordered him to get back. He would deal with the droids here. Cody was worried about his general, but without hesitation he relayed a yes sir before beginning to do as a covering fire retreat. Obi-Wan looked over at Ahsoka and told her to get back and stand with the troops. Ahsoka was very quick on her mind and she was going to rebuttal, saying that the Jedi didn't run, but the stern look on Obi-Wan's face and the droids breaking through the wall said otherwise, as she obeyed her master and joined Cody and the rest of the men in their covering fire retreat. Obi-Wan cut through the droids alone, as then he was facing down the barrel of an AT-T, to which he politely surrendered to General Losum. As Obi-Wan began discussing the elements of his surrender, he began to enact the talent of which he had a nickname for, the Negotiator. Obi-Wan stalled for as long as he could, whilst making sure he gave enough time to Anakin to get the shield down. It wouldn't take as long as Obi-Wan thought for the shields to go down, but as a small BNI 393 carried out drinks, the shields vanished. Obi-Wan smiled as he leaped over General Loathsome and wrapped his arm around the neck, demanding a surrender. It was always great to fight a living being. They were much more practical than a mindless droid. Obi-Wan was able to obtain a surrender just in time for Republic reinforcements from the core alongside of Master Yoda to arrive. Yoda came to relay information to the Jedi about Jabba the Hutt's son. He was captured by some pirates and information had it that the child was on Teth. Yoda was dispatching Skywalker and his legion to deal with the pirates and recover the child, while Obi-Wan and Ahsoka were being sent to Tatooine to negotiate with Jabba the Hutt himself. Ahsoka was very nervous for this as well. Being a crime lord was something else entirely, but the calm reserve that her master had led to her feeling just as confident. She soon came to learn how being a Jedi in a time of war was so difficult. Ahsoka and Obi-Wan would take their Jedi starfighters across the galaxy to Tatooine, leaving the division on Christophsis until they were ready for combat again. While the journey through hyperspace would take only a matter of hours, Ahsoka and Obi-Wan would converse, talking about broad concepts like the Force and what it meant to truly be a Jedi in times of war. Ahsoka was also genuinely curious about her master's approach to negotiation and why he was so revered for it inside of the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan laughed it off. He was extremely humbled about his negotiation abilities, as he told Ahsoka that it wasn't something for him to gloat over. It just was a mere expression of his understanding. Ahsoka didn't really quite understand what this meant. Obi-Wan laughed as he told Ahsoka that the true essence of being a Jedi Master or a Master of Negotiation was patience, and understanding the individual that he or she was negotiating with. It was all about giving what was fair and receiving the best possible outcome. He told her he'd show her when they got to Jabba. This would be a very basic lesson in negotiation. Obi-Wan then asked Ahsoka what it was that she would like to learn most from him during their training. She smiled in her cockpit and leaned back. She didn't really have an idea of what she really wanted to learn during this training process. Obi-Wan grinned as he told her that it was perfectly fine. She could take her time to figure out what it was that she wanted to learn for the time being. Until she figured it out, Obi-Wan would teach her what he taught Anakin, with the added side effect of being a part of a war effort. The two continued talking until they arrived on Tatooine, where Obi-Wan would inform his new student that with Jabba, she needed to present herself as who she was. Jabba was very disrespectful to anyone who did not demand his respect. It's just who he was. If a mercenary or bounty hunter showed that they were cowardice, then he wouldn't hire them. Just like if the Jedi went in without a front, he wouldn't be willing to negotiate with them. As the two landed their starfighters, Obi-Wan hopped out first and raised his robe over his head, as Ahsoka did the same, mirroring her new master. She followed closely with him, as if she were his shadow. Ahsoka watched Obi-Wan from beneath her robe and her own calm demeanor. She smiled as she felt like a true Jedi for a moment, and then she heard the voice of Bib Fortuna, which caught her attention. Obi-Wan told Bib that he wanted to speak to his master. Bib told Obi-Wan that Ahsoka and him should follow. As they were presented in front of Jabba, Ahsoka saw the beast himself in front of her. He wasn't a pleasant sight to see, but he was a Hutt after all. The smell inside of Jabba's palace wasn't exactly hospitable either, but it would have to do for now. Obi-Wan stepped forward and presented himself to the mighty Jabba the Hutt. Obi-Wan told Jabba that he would like to propose a trade, suggesting that when the Jedi find his son, the Republic could use his hyperspace routes for the war effort. Jabba was obviously willing to make this deal, anything to get his son back into his hands once again. Jabba told the Jedi that it was a fair trade, but the Republic needed to save his son before the droids did. Obi-Wan would bow, and he as an apprentice would walk out of the palace so that they may send the transmission to the Republic, informing them of the deal. The moment they walked out, Ahsoka asked her master why the Hutts had so much control in the galaxy, if all they did was crime and break laws. Obi-Wan walked with his apprentice back to their starships as he told her that all who gain power are often able to influence others to follow them. The Hutts gain their power through their wealth and from their ability to buy their way to the top. Most crime families didn't engage with them, and the Republic worked with them in their own way. To an extent, the Hutts were like a mini faction in the galaxy. Their influence on the Outer Rim was much more prominent than the influence of the Republic in the Outer Rim. Ahsoka asked why that was. Obi-Wan said that while it was up to the Senate and the Chancellor to take a hold of the galaxy and lead it with compassion and kindness, it had been frequent for the Chancellor of the galaxy to become greedy and forget their campaign promises. Palpatine was certainly not an exception, but he showed a less greedy front, which brought him popularity and allowed him to extend his stay as Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic. Ahsoka nodded her head as if she retained any of the information Obi-Wan had just told her, as her master asked his droid to relay a signal back to the Jedi Temple. Obi-Wan wanted to know the situation on Skywalker finding the sun, but he also wanted to tell the Jedi that Jabba was in for the deal. The Jedi informed Kenobi that Skywalker had engaged a droid force on Teth. The Jedi requested that Obi-Wan get there to provide reinforcements. Obi-Wan nodded his head as he ended the communication and prepared to jump into his ship. Before he did, Ahsoka grabbed his elbow. Obi-Wan looked down. Ahsoka asked why they didn't tell Jabba that his son was captured by the droid forces. Obi-Wan bit his lip, and then he smiled. She was absolutely correct. Kenobi told Ahsoka that sometimes the master can learn from the student, as he told her that she would have the honor of telling Jabba about this herself. Ahsoka looked back at Obi-Wan with a maddening expression. She wasn't sure if she was ready to talk to Jabba the Hutt. Obi-Wan assured her that she could do it with no issue. She just needed to believe in herself. Obi-Wan walked in with her and laughed to himself, as he told her that she was very wise to ask that question. Obi-Wan had to admit that the war effort threw him off. It was very weird for the Jedi, all of them. The Force was extremely out of balance, and it inhibited their own use of it. Obi-Wan, only a few months before, would have never jumped into a starfighter without thinking. Obi-Wan told Ahsoka to keep her level-headedness. She was better for it, and Obi-Wan even called her wise beyond her years for it. Ahsoka was proud of herself for this compliment, though she had to admit she was trying to be the Padawan Obi-Wan wanted her to be. It wasn't her sucking up to Obi-Wan, but she was trying to be more of the apprentice that Obi-Wan would demand from her. Ahsoka had a natural wit, and even an attitude that would be more of a fit for a Quinlan Vos or Skywalker. But Obi-Wan was not them. He was a traditional teacher, and he was very reserved. Ahsoka smiled as the two of them walked through the palace. Ahsoka knew she would have to work hard to be the student that Obi-Wan wanted her to become. While Obi-Wan demanded a lot, he wasn't going to be as hard on Ahsoka as he was with Anakin. They were very different students, and while Ahsoka, as of now, hadn't shown any rebellious tendencies, he knew that she would be much more of a breeze than Anakin was. As the two of them entered the throne room, Ahsoka spoke up, referring to Jabba as Mighty Jabba. The droid translated back to Ahsoka as she stuttered, and then looked at her master, who was standing proudly behind her. A little boost of confidence found itself in her chest, as she told Jabba that the droids had captured her son. She then told him that General Skywalker was leading a group of clones to take Jabba's son back from the droids. Jabba was outraged. He thought that the Separatists would have been on his side, but it seemed as if they stole his son to set the Republic up. Jabba told the two of them to stay at his palace. They would have protection here, that is, until Jabba had a feeling or would feel as if the Republic was lying about this operation. Obi-Wan told Ahsoka that they needed to relay information back to the fleet, especially to ensure Cody and the men got the Teth to help Anakin's forces without waiting up for them. The information came to the fleet as a small surprise, but it didn't matter. They were already on the move, and without Obi-Wan joining them, they would be able to get the Teth much sooner. Anakin, on the other hand, was able to secure the Hutt child. He and his men were trapped inside of the palace on Teth, with no ability to communicate with anyone. When the reinforcements eventually arrived, it was perfect timing. Asajj Ventress was knocking on the doors of the palace, and the droid forces were overwhelming in comparison to those inside of the Teth Palace. The Republic fleet was timed perfectly, though on Tatooine there was a slight issue for Kenobi and Ahsoka. Dooku had been on the planet. Expecting the two Jedi to leave, he stayed behind. He was going to influence Jabba with falsified information. But since the Jedi didn't leave, there was no room for that. Obi-Wan had been talking to Ahsoka about plenty of things, most of which was the political atmosphere of the galaxy, and how the war greatly affected it. He also talked about the Jedi's political presence. Kenobi was extremely well educated, quite brilliant of a Jedi. It was another reason why he was on the High Council. He had a greater understanding of the galaxy. Ahsoka was extremely fortunate to have someone like Kenobi as her teacher, especially since he was kind and compassionate. Not that Skywalker would have not been any of these, but his reckless behavior would have encouraged such behavior from Ahsoka. Within a matter of hours, it was obvious that the Republic had secured a victory on Teth, and Skywalker and his men were making their way back to Tatooine with the Hutt child. Kenobi and Ahsoka, who were waiting outside the palace for Skywalker, continued talking, creating a greater sense and understanding of each other. Everyone knew who Obi-Wan was. He trained the Chosen One. He was the first Jedi to kill a Sith in over millennia. He was quite a special Jedi. There was no going around how special Obi-Wan was in the eyes of the Order. Many of the younglings looked up to him, one of them even being Ahsoka. Eventually, Obi-Wan would notice the familiar presence of Dooku and move himself into high alert. But Dooku would never show himself. He could risk the duel, but with the protection of the Hutts and the eventual arrival of Skywalker, it was no use. The Separatists lost their advantage, and therefore they lost the Outer Rim hyperspace routes. It was a shame for sure, but it would have to suffice for now. With the Republic victory secured and the Outer Rim hyperspace lanes given to the Republic, the war was starting to get off on the right foot. Skywalker would separate from Kenobi and Ahsoka to begin going across the galaxy with his own respective fleet. Though for the Republic, there was a slight issue. A super weapon had been found, kind of. There were entire Republic fleets that were being wiped off the face of the galaxy with no trace of an enemy ship doing it. Though scouts were able to relay information back that there was a super ship that would shoot EMP rounds and disable fleets, and then open fire with all of its super lasers on the victims and rip them apart. This ship was being led by General Grievous, which wasn't widely known at this point. At the moment, the Republic had lost contact with Jedi Master Plo Koon. Anakin's fleet was deployed in the area, but there was nothing from any of the survivors. Anakin was told to stay put, though this brought a great amount of sadness to Ahsoka. She told her master after staying quiet throughout the briefing that she was worried about Master Plo. Obi-Wan understood how much this meant for Ahsoka. He knew he couldn't abandon his fleet, but if him and Ahsoka took a Jedi shuttle out to the system that Plo was last sighted at, there was a chance they could save him. Sure, the chances weren't high, but if he was still alive, then it would certainly be worth it. Ahsoka was very gracious for her master's understanding, but Obi-Wan was more proud of her for being so patient. He knew how badly she wanted to speak during the briefing, and he knew that she was extremely worried for Master Plo. Her ability to stay patient despite all of that was admirable, and it was extremely respectable. This was part of the reason why Obi-Wan rewarded her with going to go and find Plo Koon. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka made their way for the system that Plo was last sighted at. Obi-Wan told Ahsoka that she may find something that she didn't want to find. But if Plo was still out there, she and him needed to focus on their connection to Master Plo in order to find him. Ahsoka listened as Obi-Wan told her the importance of sustaining her connection to Plo when they arrived. He also explained how to do it. Once they arrived at a hyperspace, they flew the Jedi shuttle around as they looked for Plo Koon. All they could see was death and destruction, clones left in the cold ruins of space and the debris of Plo's former fleet. This certainly hurt Ahsoka to see. Obi-Wan looked over and reminded her that she needed to focus on Plo, to see if she could feel his essence. If she could, then he was still alive. They flew through the debris as Obi-Wan and Ahsoka both focused on the Force, and on their respective connections to Master Plo. They were able to locate him rather quickly. As they got Plo and his crew on board, Obi-Wan immediately took the ship back into hyperspace. He knew it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume that the superweapon was still floating around the system. They would be better off getting away with Plo and the clones still alive, rather than risking all their lives just to get a look at it. With everyone secured, the shuttle pulled out of the wreckage field, and, just as Malevolus came into viewing range, the shuttle jumped into hyperspace. It was perfectly timed as Obi-Wan hit the hyperdrive, and the ship jumped away. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka would take care of the clones, and Plo Koon, who were drained from their encounter with the Separatist hunter droids. Once back at Kenobi's fleet, the clones and Plo got the assistance that they needed, but Obi-Wan would be informed that the Malevolence was moving towards a medical Republic facility. If it hit the station, it could wipe out a majority of the Grand Army of the Republic's wounded soldiers. This particular medical facility was one of a few, but it was the largest and most operational, holding several thousands of clone troopers, all of which were using the medical facility to recover from battle. Obi-Wan knew that they could mobilize to cut off the Separatists, but his daring apprentice had a better plan. It was to take a group of clone bombers through an old Spice Runners route to beat the Separatists to the medical station. The clones would take this route, and then they would cut off the malevolence there. Obi-Wan agreed with the plan that Anakin proposed, as he would take the main fleet around and meet up at the medical facility. Plo Koon would accompany Anakin, and Ahsoka would stay with Kenobi. Over the course of the next several hours, it would be a success. The Malevolence would lose control of its shields, and Obi-Wan's fleet would lay all of its heavy batteries into the Separatist superweapon. That, without a hyperdrive, couldn't escape from the system. The Republic fleet was able to destroy the Separatist supership within a matter of a couple of hours. Obi-Wan and Anakin would part ways again, after destroying the supership and saving Padme. But Anakin would also have a sense of jealousy. Not for Obi-Wan, but for Ahsoka. She and Obi-Wan were clearly bonding well. Ahsoka stood next to Obi-Wan proudly, and she had a sense of fondness for her master, a great sense after all. She was almost a spitting image of him. She was quiet, reserved, and smart. While Ahsoka still had tendencies to speak when not spoken to, overreact, and even have the right intention but the wrong action, she was learning well. Had she been with Skywalker, she would have learned this, but in a much different way, and it may have taken her longer. Anakin was certainly more rambunctious than Obi-Wan, after all. But Skywalker, to an extent, was a bit jealous of the relationship between Obi-Wan and Ahsoka. It wasn't that he loathed Ahsoka, it was that he missed the feeling he had of being Obi-Wan's student in a way. He didn't want to be a student again, he didn't miss that, but he missed the duality of a master and apprentice bond. It was hard to explain, let alone grasp, in Anakin's own mind. With the Malevolence defeated, the Republic would spread back out across numerous battlefronts. Anakin would lead the 501st across the galaxy. As for Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, they would continue their training while leading the 7th Sky Corps and the 212th across the galaxy as well. With Marshal Commander Cody, the 212th was in good hands. While Ahsoka and Cody didn't have an extremely tight bond, Kenobi and Cody were just like brothers, very similar to one another in their own respect. Kenobi and Cody were battle tacticians, and while Ahsoka was learning that, Cody didn't really care for having a Padawan around him, someone who was always asking questions and seeking confirmation on certain decisions. Ahsoka was a sloppy leader at certain points, but she was still very young. Obi-Wan lessened his grip on her more and more as she seemed to grow in comfortability with being a leader. As the months continued forward and Ahsoka learned from her master, while also adopting a similar style of lightsaber combat to the Master of Defense, she would find herself maturing at an incredible rate. Obi-Wan would spend a lot of time with Ahsoka, making sure he could bring the best out of her, but before she knew it, she would find herself with the 212th on a battlefront yet again. The war wasn't easy, and it took its toll on all of its youngest members. As for Ahsoka and Kenobi, they'd be sent across the galaxy on a 3-part invasion started by Anakin Skywalker at Ryloth. The invasion of Ryloth was important because the Separatists had captured all the natives of the planet and were forcing them into cages and starving them to death. They were also using the natives as cannon fodder once the Republic broke through the blockade, thanks to General Skywalker and his small fleet. Obi-Wan was the second hand of the invasion. It was their mission to take out the flak cannons which were targeting the weaker carriers. The Republic sent its gunships down into combat with Kenobi, Cody, and Ahsoka in tow. It was a quick landing process, but as they landed, the clones followed their Jedi generals into combat. Obi-Wan was quick as he led his men through the forested area. The clones then ducked into cover as the droid defense towers saw movement in the trees. The droids were quick to stay on defense. Kenobi, on the other hand, saw that this was not going to be something he wanted to risk his men in a frontal assault. It wouldn't be right. They would lose an unnecessary amount of men if he did. Kenobi looked over at Ahsoka and 2 clones who were talking about wanting to see some action, Waxer and Boyle, and he would take the 4 of them down as they dodged fire into a small embankment. Kenobi got the clones and his Padawan down there safe as they were put under heavy fire. Kenobi told the clones to drop and throw their droid poppers, as he and Ahsoka would give them the extra distance. Waxer and Boyle, while still unsure, followed the orders as they threw their droid poppers with all their strength. Ahsoka and Kenobi pushed the small detonators up and far enough to where they would be able to knock out the droid towers. With a successful hit, the clones would then break into the fortifications. They had to be very careful. The citizens were nowhere to be found. This meant that the Republic needed to find the citizens and make sure that they weren't executed. Ahsoka, Waxer, and Boyle would go on a reconnaissance mission, while the rest of the clones would follow Kenobi and Cody through the streets, looking for the civilians. Within hours, Ahsoka, Waxer, and Boyle would find a Twi'lek girl. She was very obviously scared, but they would have to rescue her. At the same time, the Separatists would release starved animals into the streets, killing off the clones and trying to kill the Jedi. Though this wouldn't work, as Obi-Wan would calmly get the animals into a hidden area where the clones would be able to shoot a small bridge down on top of them and trap them for the time being. It would be some time until Ahsoka and the two men showed up. Kenobi wasn't exactly thrilled about their little detour, but he understood why they weren't able to communicate with him. The clones needed an evacuation plan to get the civilians out of Dodge so that the men could save the Twi'leks from the droid forces. The tactical droid had a tight grip on the people of the town, but it wouldn't last. The clones led by Ahsoka and Kenobi would lead a successful counter-offensive against the droid forces, freeing the citizens and destroying the flak cannons in the process. This would allow Mace Windu to meet up with Cham Syndulla and lead an assault against the capital and take down the droid forces and capture Wat Tambor. As the Republic continued winning and even losing, it often found itself with victories under certain generals and their legions. One of the poster boys of the war effort, Obi-Wan Kenobi, was one of those great generals who consistently found victory. The patience of a true Jedi Master, the eagerness of his student, and the strategy of Commander Cody, there was almost no battle they couldn't win. Some sticky situations, sure, but more or less they found themselves in victory. A couple months into the first year of combat, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ahsoka Tano were sent to Mandalore. Their leader, Duchess Satine, was in need of protection, as she and a couple of other senators from the Neutral Systems Coalition needed protection. First, Obi-Wan and Ahsoka would go to Mandalore to meet with her. From there, they would depart from Mandalore to go to Coruscant. Obi-Wan and Satine's first interaction was certainly interesting for someone like Ahsoka. She didn't know these two had a past, but their awkwardness and very felt tension between the two of them made it very obvious that the two of these people had something between them before. While Ahsoka didn't know what it was, she did know that it was deep-seated. Obi-Wan and Satine would walk with their arms linked with one another. Nothing too special, but enough for Ahsoka to notice the closeness between her master and the Duchess. The three would continue to walk around Mandalore, escorted by a guard. It was very peaceful until a Mandalorian man attempted to assassinate the Duchess. She was saved by Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka's quick intuition led her to capture the man. He tried running away, but he wasn't able to. Ahsoka was way too quick. The man spoke in the ancient Mandalorian dialect, as he told Satine that Death Watch would be coming for her, and her reign as an insufficient ruler was at an end. Satine wished the man well as the guard took him away. The people around watched the calm demeanor of their leader, as she didn't racked with hostility or vengeance. A simple, gentle response with the opportunity for redemption. The people looked up to her, and while it wasn't the traditional way of the Mandalore, that traditional way was what set them back. Every time the warriors got too rambunctious, they were put down like a plague. Satine was very obviously not one of them. She was very obviously not going to let that warrior past overshadow what could be done with a prosperous future, such as a future as she was currently building for the planet. Mandalore was thriving like never before, and that was partially due to her desire to abandon the warrior way. Obi-Wan took a hold of Satine as they continued walking after the little incident. Satine was very proud of Kenobi. The last time she saw him, he was a student, and now the circle was complete. He was the master. They caught up over time, but Kenobi, as interested as he was with Satine, was very worried about her safety. The trio would go to Mandalore's moon to visit Pre Vizsla. It would be here that Ahsoka and Obi-Wan would break off from Satine to go and find the Death Watch. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka would remain free without being captured as they made their way to a Mandalorian base. Satine would eventually be called into their location, where she could see what Death Watch was amassing to take her down. After a small confrontation with Pre Vizsla, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Satine would make a daring escape. Immediately afterwards, Satine, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka would board a massive vessel to get Satine and some other senators to Coruscant. The voyage was completely full of Mandalorian security, clone troopers, and 2 Jedi. While Satine thought this to be overkill, once the ship went into hyperspace, things would begin to heat up. 2 of the clones on the supply deck would go missing. Ahsoka, Cody, Waxer, and Boyle would be sent down to the supply deck to investigate. What they found were assassin droids, full of little probes that would go out and try to electrocute his victims. The clones and Ahsoka worked as fast as they could to dismember the little droids. As R7A7, Ahsoka's R2 unit, saved the clones by using his little shocker to shut them down. Ahsoka and the clones were able to destroy the 3 assassin droids, but waves of the little probe droids escaped. Obi-Wan and Satine were shocked when they started pouring out of the vents, but these two knew how to work together, as they jumped to each other's backs and worked as a duo. Lightsaber and stunner together as they wiped out the little probe and protected the other senators. As the time continued to pass, Kenobi would use his big brain to find out who the culprit was. Using the little probe, he found that Merrick was the one who tried to assassinate the Duchess, though Merrick wouldn't be able to escape when Ahsoka would sneak up behind him and cut his hand off. Satine would be able to break free from Merrick, and then she would run over to Obi-Wan. A short, brief moment that showcased what a life without the Jedi Order could do for the two of them, before Satine returned back to a calm and poised demeanor. The few clones with Ahsoka arrested Merrick. Without the ship being pulled from hyperspace, the ship was able to land on Coruscant with very little issues. Ahsoka kept her mouth shut until a little moment between Obi-Wan and Satine made her question everything. Satine playfully would walk up to Obi-Wan as she grabbed his face gently and told him that she was grateful, but she wasn't sure about the beard. A soft smile and a gentle laugh had her turn away with her guard as she went to talk to the Republic about issues with the Death Watch and how the coalition of neutral systems could negotiate a fair treaty with the Republic, considering Mandalore headed thousands of systems in this neutral system coalition. Ahsoka looked at Obi-Wan with a promiscuous face as she prompted to ask a question. Obi-Wan smiled and shook his head as he told her that there would be another time for this conversation to continue. The two of them would return to the Jedi Temple, where they would train, surrounded by their own peers for the first time in months. Ahsoka was progressing rather fast. She was also growing incredibly quick too. Her teacher allowed her to find a subtle balance within herself. It gave her the ability to be the Jedi she knew she could always be. She silenced some of her more immature outbursts as she became more like her master, soft-spoken, confident, mature, and very Jedi-like. While Ahsoka wasn't closely tied to the code as her master, she did respect his respect for the code. She would learn little tidbits about Obi-Wan's past, but she never dug too deep. Because Ahsoka was Obi-Wan's student, she too would have the pleasure of facing down the asthmatic droid general, or General Clanker, as some of the clones would often refer to him, or as the elegant Kenobi would often call him, General Grievous. Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Grievous often found themselves in battle with one another. For Obi-Wan, this was incredibly stressful. Grievous had killed several Jedi Masters in his own time, but he couldn't kill either Kenobi or Tano. This created a weird bond between the three of them, especially since Grievous got to see Ahsoka's growth between each encounter. It made him respect her. He was a warrior after all, how could he not respect a warrior's growth? She was still a Jedi, and he still wanted to kill her. Though Obi-Wan would never allow that to happen. Ahsoka and Obi-Wan bonded really well over their ability to beat back General Grievous in combat. Most of their duels were stalemates, due to Grievous running away or something unpredictable interrupting their duel. For Skywalker, the battlefront became lonely. Part of him longed for being around Kenobi. It wasn't that they weren't close anymore, but Obi-Wan was a teacher. His responsibility was to teach Ahsoka. So, when they were on the battlefront together, Anakin wasn't the main priority for Obi-Wan. It's not that he minded, but he longed for that connection with another Jedi. He missed having a tight-knit bond that Kenobi and Ahsoka currently shared. No, Anakin didn't want to be a student again, but seeing how close Ahsoka and Obi-Wan were made Anakin want to do the unthinkable. He would apply for his first Jedi Padawan. Similarly to how Ahsoka came to Kenobi, Anakin would be given his first student during the second year of combat on the battlefront. The name of Anakin's student was Zurgu. He was an Ithorian Zabrak, similar to that of Master Yi's Koth. He was 15, and a part of Ahsoka's former class. He was an average student, though he was a quick learner and very quiet and reserved. Anakin wasn't exactly sure how to teach or even introduce himself, so he tried doing his best Kenobi approach. Zurgu was more than honored to be Anakin's first student. He wasn't stuck up, but he was certainly prideful of being Anakin's student. He told Skywalker that he was ready to learn. though at first Anakin wasn't really sure what to do. He saw the bond and he wanted that, but now that he had it, he wasn't necessarily sure where to go with it. So he did what was natural, introducing Zurgu to the men of the 501st, trying to find a common ground between the two of them to start their bond off with. It wouldn't take long for Anakin and Zurgu to find a middle ground. Anakin needed to cut it back on his rambunctious nature a little bit, and Zurgu needed to find a more willing ability to take risks. Zurgu was also very calm and collected, which meshed really well with Anakin surprisingly. In a way, it was as if Obi-Wan was being taught by Anakin. It kinda weirded Skywalker out a bit, but he didn't mind. He and Zurgu became a great duo as they led their troops across various fronts in the galaxy, though it would eventually become time for them and one of the largest campaigns in the entire Clone Wars. Early into the second year of combat, the second invasion of Geonosis would be prepared. 3 Jedi Generals would lead this invasion. From there, a 4th Jedi General would join them. Ki-Adi-Mundi, Obi-Wan, and Skywalker would lead the assault. By this point, Zurgu and Ahsoka hadn't gotten too close. They hadn't interacted with each other much until the briefing before the battle. The main goal of this battle would be to get to Point Rain. The assault would be divided up for the Jedi Generals. Kenobi and Cody would go down the middle, Skywalker and Rex down the right flank, and Ki-Adi-Mundi and Bakura down the left. A very simple plan, but a very difficult execution. Within the coming hours, the troop transports would be prepared for a planetary campaign, and the gunships would be sent into combat. Ahsoka with her master were in the same gunship. At the same time, the battle came to life. Flat cannons shot into the air, and the Geonosian starfighters jumped into combat. Some may say good thing those bugs can't aim, but those saying would be very sorely mistaken. The landing party had a very difficult time. Most of the heavy artillery wouldn't make it down to the ground, other than a couple groups of troops with Commander Cody, who escaped the flak with great ease. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka would be shot down and would crash just beyond the checkpoint. The crash was extremely harsh as it tore up the gunship and left the Master and Apprentice duo almost dead. Everyone else inside their gunship died in the crash. On the other side of the battlefield, Anakin and Zurgu crash-landed, and were immediately pinned down by heavy fire. Zurgu and Anakin were working very closely on their bond, but they both stayed side by side in combat. They both had each other's backs, as well as Rex being by their sides. Anakin would lead an aggressive assault, which would eventually prove to be a useful tactic, as Zurgu and Rex followed closely behind. Ki-Adi-Mundi and Bakura wouldn't find any issues until the psychotic duo of terror found themselves inside of a Geonosian hive. The duo would bring forth flamethrowers and burn the bugs to the ground. It really was the perfect visual representation of Bakura and Mundi, a bunch of screaming bugs being burnt alive inside their home. On the main battle lines at Checkpoint Rain, Cody positioned all the heavy guns into a circle so that they could defend the landing zone. It was efficient, but the gunship that Kenobi was in was visible, but it was being surrounded by droid forces. 2 men would have to make a daring move to save the Jedi. Cody would send his best. Waxer and Boyle would go out into the fray to save their Jedi generals and their commander. Battle was beginning to heat up, but with heavy cover fire, Waxer and Boyle were able to get to Kenobi and Tano's LAAT. Once they got there, they found the entire crew dead except for the 2 Jedi. Ahsoka was very badly hurt. Obi-Wan was keeping her alive with him, getting her to focus on him so that she didn't fade away. She had been pierced by a large piece of debris. Obi-Wan had to seal the wound by getting the debris out and using his lightsaber to stop her from bleeding out. But it didn't mean that she didn't need help. Once the clones opened up the doors, Obi-Wan lifted Ahsoka out of the gunship. As the clones took her, Waxer carried her in his arms as Kenobi slowly got out from the rubble. He told Boyle to make sure that Waxer and Ahsoka got back safe. They were his main concern. Obi-Wan trailed behind as Boyle insisted on helping, but Kenobi had his lightsaber out and he was blocking shots from the droids behind. Once inside the circle, Ahsoka was put down next to some crates as the medic got next to her and made sure that she was okay, giving her some medicine and some stimuli to keep her alive. Obi-Wan stood weakly on the inside of the circle as Cody tried to get the general to sit down. Obi-Wan told Cody that he was with him no matter what, asking if the troops had any reinforcements. Cody had no update from Bakura, and Rex had apparently helped Skywalker and Zurgu break through a barrier on the far side of the flank. They were going to be reconvening here sometime soon, but from the droid advance, that time couldn't come soon enough. Within moments, Y-wing bombers would fly over the Republic troops and leave a row of bombing runs for the approaching Separatist forces. At that same exact time, Anakin, Mundi, and Zurgu showed up, providing the reinforcements the Republic needed. Obi-Wan smiled at Cody and patted him on the shoulder, saying that now he would take a break. Obi-Wan walked over to Ahsoka to see how she was doing. As he got down next to her, she was getting better, but she still needed medical attention from a Jedi cruiser, much like Mundi and himself needed. Skywalker asked his master how he was doing, and a snide remark came back. Zurgu was a bit taken aback, but it wasn't anything mean or rude, it's just how Obi-Wan and Anakin communicated. Through a series of wise-ass remarks, they specialized in their own form of communication. Within hours, the clones would finish the first day of siege with a total victory. Destroying the shield generator, the clones were able to secure what they needed to win. With this first victory, the 7th Sky Corps, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, Mundi, Bakra, and the entire Galactic Marine would be taken off-world. Luminar Unduli and an apprentice Barriss Offee would accompany Skywalker and Zurgu on their next phase of the assault. It would be here that Barriss and Zurgu would become close friends, especially with a nearly deadly encounter. But the victory would help the Republic secure Geonosis for the second time. In due time, the Republic would push back against the Separatists. But the war was hard. It took its effects on the Jedi and the clones. Being living beings fighting against an army of droids wore one down. It wasn't the blood of the enemy, but of the people that you loved like brothers standing side by side with you. For Ahsoka, it was hard losing a clone. It was the same for Kenobi, he just didn't show as much as Ahsoka did. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka would grow as a great duo for a long time. They would find themselves as a formidable threat, and Ahsoka would adopt her very own Shoto as an addition to her lightsaber form. While she fought very defensively, she teetered on defense and offense. Naturally, she fell into Plo Koon's style of lightsaber combat, Form 5. While she learned from Obi-Wan and was extremely proficient in Form 3, she often found herself using her strong defense to strike with a decisive offense. This was seen on several occasions with Magna Guards or even General Grievous. Ahsoka didn't use the same variation of Form 5, as was common for frequenters like Plo Koon and Anakin. Instead, she used her own variation, which she called Jem So Fengu. She also used defense of her lightsaber combat in Form 5 to pull opponents off guard. Her natural affinity for aggression matched extremely well with what Obi-Wan taught her, making her even more of a fierce opponent than she would have been, having been only taught by a practitioner of Form 5. Regardless, as the war continued, Ahsoka and Obi-Wan would find themselves on every battlefront across the galaxy. The problem with being a successful team meant that you would have to be placed on every front line, because your success was bringing the Republic closer to victory. While it was tiresome, Ahsoka and Kenobi became a duo to be reckoned with. Many people across the galaxy saw them as a duo of justice. Their encounters with the Separatists saw many victories with little loss, thanks to the growth of Ahsoka, the knowledge of Kenobi, and of course the ever-great strategy of Cody. It was fair to say that Ahsoka grew exceptionally fast under Kenobi's training. It wouldn't be a knock on Skywalker, but as a teacher who had already understood the discipline that it took to be a teacher and how to have a student excel under one's guidance, Obi-Wan put practice to work as Ahsoka excelled in each and every way, finding harmony, balance, and compassion as a true Jedi early on. Though Ahsoka and Zurgu would find a balance and a friendship with one another after they were put onto a mysterious world with one another with their teachers. The experience on Mortis was one that no one really knew how to describe, but it would come and go quickly. It eventually would lead to Obi-Wan and Anakin being tasked with saving Jedi Master Even Keel from the Citadel. This would create tension between Ahsoka and Zurgu, because Obi-Wan, who trusted his student very well, allowed Ahsoka to go with them to the Citadel. As for Zurgu, Anakin didn't allow him to go in fear that he would be killed. Anakin didn't agree with Ahsoka going in either, but she wasn't his student. Most of everything would be the same at the Citadel, even the death of Even Keel rocking the Jedi Council, and Ahsoka being given the final code needed by the Republic. Upon their return, Anakin would have more trust for Zurgu for not disobeying his orders, not that Zurgu ever would, but he also learned that he should trust his student more. As the war progressed, Anakin and Zurgu would be sent to the Mon Calamari world to help settle a dispute between the Corran and the Mon Cala. As for Kenobi and Ahsoka, they would prepare for the worst conflicts of the war. At some point during the war, Obi-Wan would go undercover as Renko Hardin, Though, as he had a student, he would not lie to her and he would tell Ahsoka about going undercover. This would lead Ahsoka to tell Obi-Wan that he should confide in Anakin about this, not to hurt him. This would build a greater trust between Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan. Skywalker and Zurga would be joining Obi-Wan and Ahsoka on a battlefront on an operation, but they would be late to the party, as Ahsoka and Kenobi led an assault on the hidden world of Umbara. The planet was covered in smoke and haze, and it was almost impossible to see in. The Umbarans were not necessarily hospitable to the Republic, and when the Republic came knocking on the door, the natives dug their heels into the ground. The Republic wouldn't be stopped though. Skywalker and Zurga would be pulled from combat and replaced with General Pong Krell. This wouldn't be an issue at first until Pong sent the 501st and a small dispatch of the 212th into combat with one another. There was a small issue though. Ahsoka went with the men of the 212th, and immediately, with the help of Captain Rex, ended the conflict between the clones before too many of them were killed. Ahsoka would inform her master of what had happened, as he would request Rex to go with the men of the 212th to the front lines, while he and a small group of clones confronted the general. Obi-Wan would go with Ahsoka as the clones surrounded Pong. Kenobi demanded that Pong would explain his actions as the sinister fallen Jedi laughed. He told Kenobi that he foresaw the fall of the Jedi and the rise of a new power. Ahsoka looked over at her master in almost a fearful way as Kenobi ignited his lightsaber, standing tall and in front of his men, demanding that Krell surrender for his crimes against the Republic, so that he may be tried and hopefully executed. Krell didn't like that. Not one bit. So using the Force, he threw all the clones from their feet and ignited his lightsabers, as Kenobi ran forward, clashing with the fallen Jedi. Ahsoka did the same as she leaped forward. The clones couldn't fire, as they all watched the two Jedi take on this monster. Krell knew he was in a tough position to win this fight, as he leapt backwards out of the Citadel Tower. Krell landed on the ground as Kenobi and Ahsoka followed suit, jumping down after him. The clones saw their opportunity as they ran to the edge and fired down on Krell before he could focus on the Jedi. It almost worked, but then they stopped once the Jedi landed. The clones in the facility all came to watch as Kenobi and Ahsoka moved back and forth. They used their skills in defense to bring Krell forward into their playing field. Kenobi could play this game all day. He was a master of defense. He just gave Ahsoka the opportunity for time to strike. Krell was a foe to be reckoned with. He struck with precision, and he was quite agile for his size. Using the double-sided lightsabers, he met the two opponents in the middle of the battlefield, with nowhere to go. There was nowhere for him to escape either. It was only a matter of time. Kenobi used his defense as he switched to Ataru, his master's lightsaber form, and pushed Krell back. The fallen Jedi didn't see it coming as he fell back and caught himself moving into defense. Obi-Wan rolled off of Ahsoka's back as she swung against Krell, leaping forward, colliding blades with Pong Krell, and Ahsoka was quick as she spun around and kicked forward, leaping between Krell's blades. Obi-Wan then collided with Krell as he pushed him back further and further. Ahsoka and Kenobi were more prepared for this than ever before because of their unique training against General Asthmatic Droid. Krell was very similar, just less skilled than the droid general himself. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka caught their breath as they held their stances on the opposite sides of Krell. They looked at each other as Kenobi kept his Form 4 stance, and as Ahsoka stood in her Form 5 Fangu stance. Krell jumped forward as Ahsoka blocked his attack, using her blade and Shoto to become the perfect opponent to Krell's strikes. Obi-Wan got behind the attacker as he swung patiently, catching Krell in his defense. Former Jedi moved back and forth between the two attackers. Ahsoka found her opportunities. She lunged forward at a strike, and then leaping over Krell, catching him in the back with his Shoto. Obi-Wan pressed forward as Krell was caught off by the magnificent pain he felt in his back. Obi-Wan jabbed forward as he cut through Krell's chest. Ahsoka leaped into the air, bringing her lightsabers down on opposite sides and cutting through both of Krell's arms. Obi-Wan looked at her as she smiled and looked at him. Obi-Wan tried to speak, but she spoke over him, telling him that he may have been a great threat, but he was no longer. Obi-Wan rolled his eyes and looked down at the fallen Jedi. The clones came running over from every direction and were very thankful for Kenobi and Tano for standing up for them and taking their side against one of their own. Sure, it was a hefty blow to Ahsoka and Obi-Wan for having to kill one of their own, but they told the clones that they were in this together. Brothers and sister on the battlefield. They needed to be that way no matter what. The clones admired them for their commitment to them. It wouldn't take long, though, for the Republic to be found as victorious in the Battle of Umbara. Long fought but won. The war would certainly continue. It was a difficult war. Ahsoka and Kenobi continued on their journey as Obi-Wan truly felt his student might be ready for knighthood. It wouldn't be long though until a loose transmission would find its way for Kenobi. It was Hondo Ohnaka and his pirates. They had been betrayed by his own men, and two crazy horned-headed maniacs, as Hondo called them, were coming for him. Obi-Wan was currently here with Ahsoka and Adi Gallia. The three went down to the surface and found a skirmish taking place. The two Sith were Savage and Maul. Maul had been hunting Kenobi since his untimely return, though it didn't really matter. He hadn't gotten his revenge, and he never would. The three Jedi leapt down from where they landed as Adi Gallia and Ahsoka took on Savage. Obi-Wan and Maul, on the other hand, began their own engagement. The two Jedi were holding Savage well, but he was a powerhouse to deal with. Obi-Wan was able to resist the temptation to join the dark side. Maul's tricks were getting old, and he was going to put an end to the Sith here. There would be no escapes, nothing he could do to stop his inevitable downfall. Savage was still very off balance, and fighting two exceptionally talented Jedi was a challenge to say the least. Ahsoka and Adi Gallia didn't have a great bond yet, but it would show as they were able to beat back Savage that they were at least forming a connection. This would all be put to an end as Savage would lower his head and slam it into Adi Gallia's stomach, killing her instantaneously. Hondo and his men would retreat into their refuge, though the Jedi would not join them. They had Maul and Savage right where they wanted them. Their combined power was something that could make Kenobi fall back, but he wouldn't do that here. He had his apprentice, and he trusted her to finish what Adi could not. Ahsoka used her Shoto against Savage as it threw him off balance. Kenobi, on the other hand, used Adi Gallia's lightsaber as he moved into a Taro again to throw Maul off balance. It worked the first time, and he killed him that one time, and it would work this time when he finished Maul off. Obi-Wan wasn't digging into anger, but he was using the skill of which he came to know firsthand. Obi-Wan and Maul dug at each other as their blades shined in the day. Ahsoka used her nimbleness to throw Savage off his game. He was a reckless fighter, and she was the polar opposite. Ahsoka used her defense against Savage as she kicked his feet out from under him, and as he charged her, Ahsoka used her lightsabers to cut into his back as he fell forward. Savage would yell out in pain. This caught Maul's attention as he looked over at his brother just long enough for Kenobi to cut through his chest. Maul dropped his lightsaber as he looked back up at Obi-Wan, realizing that he had been defeated. Obi-Wan swung his blade through Maul's neck to make sure that the job was finished this time. On the level below him, Savage got up angrily, without realizing his brother had been killed, and ran forward against Ahsoka. Obi-Wan saw this, and as he ran, he leaped into the air. Ahsoka saw her master as she waited for Savage to fall. Obi-Wan jabbed both blades into Savage's back as the massive beast tumbled to the ground. Obi-Wan flipped up and landed in front of Ahsoka, as he told her that she did well after catching his breath. With Maul and Savage dead, the Death Watch would fail to seize Mandalore. Whether it be the incompetence of Pre Vizsla, Gar Saxon, or Bo-Katan, they wouldn't have the grand strategy needed to sustain a warrior takeover of Mandalore. The truth is, without the mind of Maul, Pre Vizsla's vision of a warrior society of Mandalore would die with his band of foolish insurrectionists. The broader Clone Wars would continue to explode, but the Republic was slowly and surely finding itself closer and closer to victory. Though, during one battle above Ringovinda, everything would change when Clone Trooper Tup would execute Jedi General Tiplar in cold blood. With no recollection of it happening, Tup would be taken back to Kamino with Captain Rex, ARC Trooper 5s, and Jedi Padawan Zurgu. Anakin thought it best to have Zurgu away from the battlefront for some time. Also, Zurgu and 5s were really close. They were buddies in fact. They often ate together and shared a great deal of banter with one another. They were just as much of brothers as 5s was with anybody else in the Grand Army of the Republic. Zurgu would do anything to be there for his friend, though it was something that went deeper than anything Zurgu or 5s expected. Originally, Zurgu sided with Jedi Master Shaak Ti and Lama Su, the chief medical scientist on Kamino. But when 5s and a small droid companion removed two inhibitor chips, the one from Tup and the one from 5s, the plot thickened. Zurgu couldn't just allow this plot to go unnoticed, and he completely sided with 5s in this situation. Zurgu would take the inhibitor chips that 5s and the small droid discovered, and he would take them back to the Jedi Temple. This would all be done with Shaak Ti's approval and without the knowledge of Lama Su. Though there was also another issue. By the time Zurgu got back to the Jedi Temple, Skywalker and Rex were looking for 5s. This was a very stressful moment, but thankfully, Zurgu was able to run into the Master of the Order, Mace Windu, upon his arrival. Zurgu then immediately departed for the lower levels of Coruscant. Once Zergu arrived in the lower levels, he would find the location of Rex and Anakin. They'd apparently found his friend. So, when he went in, he heard Fives talking. Fives looked over at Zergu and told him that he was onto a plot. It was a massive deception. It was bigger than anything that he could have ever imagined. Zergu told Fives to put down the ray shield so that they could talk about it. They were all friends, and there was nothing to be worried about. Fives started to panic. He was drugged by Lama Su, and it wasn't his fault for being so paranoid, but Zergu used his presence to calm Fives. Anakin watched his apprentice work with the Force empathetically, and he was incredibly proud of his student for how far he'd come. Though his calmness would be etched out of the room when all of a sudden the Coruscant guard busted down the door. Fives panicked as Zergu used the Force to throw him against the crates behind him. Zergu then threw a blaster bolt towards the ray shield, shutting it offline, allowing Anakin and Rex to free themselves. They were also able to get in front of Fives and protect him. Commander Fox was the one that shot the blaster bolt. He had exclusive orders to kill Fives and whoever appeared to be protecting him. As he fired rounds at Zergu, the Jedi Padawan raised both of his hands as he held the blaster bolts in mid-air, stopping them between Fox and himself. Zergu held his breath as he concentrated on keeping the blaster bolts elevated. Anakin stepped forward and ordered Fox to stand down. At the same time, Rex pushed Fives behind a crate and told them that they were going to sneak out and get to the Jedi Temple. Fives nodded his head. He was freaked out, but Rex was calming him down. Anakin used the Force to throw the blaster bolts into the lights as the visibility of the room darkened. It was time for Fives and Rex to escape to the shuttle and depart for the Jedi Temple. Fox was about ready to arrest the two Jedi as he raised his blasters towards them. Anakin stood tall over Fox and told them that they had not broken the law. If there was something Fives wanted to say, he needed to say it. Fox was very pissed. His orders were directly from the Chancellor, as he ordered the men to arrest the two Jedi. Zergu looked over at Anakin, and his master raised his hand. He wasn't thrilled, but it was obvious that if Palpatine had nothing to hide, he wouldn't have ordered Fox to arrest anyone for helping Fives. If he had something to hide, then Fives would reveal it. Zergu and Anakin would be arrested by Fox and taken to the Grand Republic prison on Coruscant. Fives and Rex would head towards the Jedi Temple. Fives would begin to calm down, and he would tell Rex that he was drugged by Lama Su. Rex knew something was up with the situation. Between the way that Fives had been acting and the drugging alone that was done by Lama Su, it seemed that the plot was thicker than anyone ever realized. Once they arrived on the Jedi Temple, Mace Windu and a handful of council members were already waiting. They needed the information, and they would do what they needed to do, what was needed to be done. Fives quickly gave a rundown of what Palpatine said. He told him that these chips were meant to execute the Jedi whenever he wanted, saying that he was behind the Clone Wars and he had been a part of everything. And that was when Fives cut him out. It freaked him out. Fives knew that Palpatine had a part to play in the Clone Wars, but to what extent he wasn't entirely sure. It was all the Council really needed to know. Shaak Ti, Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Mace Windu left the temple grounds, leaving behind a handful of other council members to protect the temple. Once the Jedi arrived, Palpatine was informed of Anakin and Zergu's capture. This was very upsetting because he needed to find a way out of it, a way to talk it out of him. But he didn't have time because the Jedi were walking into his office the moment he found out. He had no guards as the 4 Jedi ignited their lightsabers, demanding to know why he said what he said to Fives. Sidious laughed as he raised his 2 crimson blades from behind his desk. There was no more playing around. He needed to kill these Jedi and make an escape. Sidious believed he could. Considering everything backfired, he never expected Fives to break out and get to the Jedi Temple. He assumed that Lama Su gave him enough drugs to make him wither away, but apparently she only confused him for a short period of time. Sidious had to move quickly. He had some fierce opponents in front of him though. Sidious struck for Kenobi as the Master of Defense backpedaled and blocked every strike shot at him. Sidious twisted around and met blades with Shaak Ti, who kept pace with the Sith Lord. Mace then shot forward as he engaged Sidious. Yoda was quick too. Mace and Yoda, with their blades between them, pushed Sidious back. Kenobi and Shaak Ti created a semicircle, keeping Sidious from escaping the duality of offensive power between Yoda and Windu. It was impressive. Several colors of lightsabers blasting away between each other. Sidious was unable to escape. Instead of this Jedi doing this one at a time, they went in all as one. As good of a duelist that Sidious was, his time was very limited, and it was over when he was cut down between the 2 Jedi duelists of Mace and Yoda. With the Sith dead, the Jedi won an achievable victory, but there was much more that needed to be done. Sure, Maul and Savage were also off the map, but there was still Dooku and Grievous. This would create tension for the Republic, especially losing their Chancellor, who was secretly a Sith Lord. While it would take a lot of convincing, the testimonial from ARC Trooper 5s was enough to convince the Republic that Chancellor Palpatine was secretly Darth Sidious. It was a hard pill to swallow, but the Republic needed a leader to see out the rest of the war. They chose a leader who was moderately popular with everyone, and his name was Bail Organa. He was favorable, and he was the only one who competed with Palpatine during his second election run. It was a natural role that he would fill until the war was over and the Republic could choose a Reconstruction Chancellor. The Republic was also very quickly to side with the Jedi because of the testimonial that ARC Trooper 5s gave. If Palpatine was seriously behind the war effort, then it meant that he was betraying the Republic all the time. There was no exception for that. For now, with Sidious dead, the Clone Wars would continue to drag on, though there would be a lot of pomp and circumstance. Ahsoka would be knighted and become a Jedi Knight. She was very proud of this achievement, but because she was a Jedi Knight, it didn't mean she didn't serve with anyone other than her master. Ahsoka would stick close with Obi-Wan for the duration of the continuing war. Anakin and Zurgu would also be on battlefronts consistently. While the Separatists had the numbers to win the war was at a point where the Republic was set up to win. Palpatine was going to make the war look like a natural victory. He just didn't anticipate on being killed before the war's completion. This meant that Dooku and Grievous needed to make up for lost ground. The war would continue and would be elongated, as it would eventually enter its 4th year of combat. During this 4th year, Kenobi and Ahsoka would find themselves hot in the trail of General Grievous. With the Separatists putting their best foot forward, the war turned into a stalemate. The Separatists still not opting for peace, the Republic was going all in to win. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka were being sent after General Grievous, as he was found jumping from star system to star system after losing a majority of his army against Plo Koon and the Wolf Pack. It was an unsuspecting loss. It really was an ambush between the pack and a group of locals. Grievous had no fleet to go back to, and he had a single starship with very little fuel. The closest fleet was in the far reaches of the Outer Rim, and he stuck over his stepping boundaries in the Mid-Rim. Sadly for Grievous, he was all the Separatists had left in terms of military leadership. Dooku had died a natural death late into the 3rd year of combat, and with Dooku's death there was a huge loss of morale from the Separatist leaders, not to mention that Trench was killed over at Naxos in the 3rd year of combat as well. Grievous would find himself on Hypori, where he'd be confronted by the 2 Jedi he had been fighting with throughout the war, Ahsoka and Obi-Wan Kenobi. The 2 of them showed up ready for a fight, and ready to end this dreadful war. Grievous ignited his weapons, tired, dreary, and not ready to lose the fight of his life. As a warrior, this was a decadent fall from grace. As a general, this was rather disgraceful. Grievous lunged forward. Obi-Wan had gotten better at Form 3, as he countered every single one of Grievous's moves. As for Master Tano, she fought with precision. Yes, Ahsoka had a student, and her name was Daisha Numa. She didn't come on this mission with her. Instead, Daisha was with Commander Cody and the main fleet. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka bounced off one another, fighting like true duelists. They used each other as guides as they cut forward, slicing back and forth. Their precision as a duo was unmatched. Grievous was very talented as a warrior, but he hadn't improved. It seemed as if he was lacking now. He was an aggressive user as ever, but he fell short in terms of ferocity. It was kind of sad for Kenobi and Tano, watching this proud warrior see his own downfall, but they matched Grievous's strikes with parries of their own as they took down and took the fight back to Grievous, moving from defense to offense. Grievous was unprepared as he lost the duel rather quickly. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka were proud of their efforts, but it wasn't the end of their duty. It seemed as if the Separatists were staging one last offensive on Bothawai. It wouldn't get them anywhere, but the 7th Sky Corps was heading there. Kenobi and Tano informed the Council that Grievous was dead, and that they were going to head to Bothawai to finish off the Seppies, and bring home a victory for the Republic. The Battle of Bothawai wasn't fought in space. The Seppies dug their clanker heels into the ground, and they were not going to give up until every single one of them was destroyed. The super tactical droid ensured that the Republic would lose troops in his final stand. The clones were quick on the offensive. Daisha and Cody were moving side by side as they pressured hard into the Separatist base. Cody ordered Daisha to head back and gather up the remaining reinforcements and lead them in on his orders. She smiled at him, and as he and the rest of the clones advanced, moved into their city. She smiled at him as he and the rest of the advanced 212th made their way into the city. Waxer and Boyle followed closely behind Cody as they went in after the droids, only to find a barren landscape with just a super tactical droid. The droid laughed, and then he held a small detonator. Within moments, the entire city exploded. All of the clones who ran in, after 4 years of bloody conflict, 4 years of survivor's guilt, surviving the war, beating droids, every single clone was killed in the explosion. The explosion clouded the sky as Obi-Wan and Ahsoka arrived. The two of them made their way for the site of the explosion, hoping that it was the clones breaking through. But then a communication from Daisha came through. She sounded very upset, but neither Jedi could figure out why. She said that they were all in an explosion. Daisha, alongside the saddened rest of the 212th, watched as the fires bellowed out of where they last saw their commander. Many clones removed their helmets. It was a trap. A single super tactical droid trying to cause as much pain as he could. It was his program after all. And he successfully did so. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka landed as they used the Force to quell the flames. Ahsoka cried out Obi-Wan's name when she found a helmet. It was Cody's. It broke her heart. The Republic was so close to victory, and yet none of these men, these great soldiers, would ever see the day. Obi-Wan and Ahsoka hugged one another. It was a loss of their friend, their commander. The men would be properly buried, and the trip back to Coruscant would be longer than the one to Bothawai. But with the Separatists finally defeated, their entire Separatist Council would be tried for crimes against the Republic. The Republic would be able to rise from the ashes of war. And while the crimes committed against the clones would be tough as a scar to cover up, the memories of the war would fade. For Ahsoka, she would continue training students after successfully training Daisha. Ahsoka would find herself on the Jedi Council alongside of her master not long after the events of Bothawai. Obi-Wan would visit Satine from time to time and actually share a secret love affair with her as a master on the High Council. After having seen so much peril and death during the Clone Wars, he couldn't ignore what he truly felt in his heart. And while he thought about leaving the Order, Satine suggested he stay as a Jedi. But if he truly loved her and thought that he could stay in the Order, then he could be with her. Obi-Wan made some compromises, but as such any lasting relationship, it worked. Anakin, on the other hand, would train Zurgu into knighthood, and then join the ranks of the Jedi Council like his master as well. He'd become a proud father in the 3rd year of combat, but without any nightmares of Padme dying, he'd find no reason to seek the dark side. Instead, he would continue to find peace and tranquility as a Jedi, with trust in the Order and the Council. The galaxy, after having been through so much through the Clone Wars, would eventually find itself in a new era of peace and justice. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Benjamin Wells, Icy Raptor, and Gort for supporting the channel. Let's do 2,000 likes so we can see whatever the next thumbnail is. I don't know what the video is yet, but we will find out on the thumbnail. If you want to see a what if, let me know below. Or comments about do crossovers, check out the Twitch community, Discord, and Patreon to support me in other ways. And if you want to learn how to win in our next giveaway, subscribe. We're shooting for 50,000 subscribers. Go down below. There's a docs. You click on the docs. You put your name down below on the docs. Don't change anything. And that's it. You just put your name on the docs, and I will announce 3 winners when we hit 50,000 subscribers. So smash the like button, subscribe, and share. I know school's in session, and I know you guys are busy, but if you guys could do that, it would be a great help, and we can give away some free lightsabers. Anyways, let's talk about our story here. This certainly is a lot longer than I intended it to be. Now, when we talk about Anakin being trained, most of the events are pretty recognizable. Most of them are going to be pretty similar, because Anakin is Anakin, right? Obviously, there are things that are going to change if something happens before the Clone Wars, but we normally assume that most of everything's going to be similar. It's different here. Obi-Wan training Anakin or training Ahsoka is a big difference because Ahsoka is going to be present on all those battlefields with Obi-Wan and all those adventures with Obi-Wan rather than being with Anakin. And it kind of creates a weird dystopia. It's kind of weird because I feel like there would still be a bond between Ahsoka and Anakin, just not like the one that we have in canon. And it's kind of like a weird mirror of canon in a way. It's like really bizarre. It's the bond between Obi-Wan and Ahsoka. And I want to talk about that because I feel like there's going to be some controversy between that. Now, Obi-Wan is a great master. Let's just not overshadow that. He's a terrific master, right? Obviously, Anakin is a student unlike any other. Having trained Anakin, I feel like Obi-Wan would be a much more exceptional teacher to Ahsoka, because he would have worked with probably the most challenging student he could have ever had. He would have worked with literally the broken one, and he would have trained him into being a knight, and I think he would have excelled at training someone that was someone like Ahsoka. Now for Ahsoka. Now, we all remember Ahsoka when she first was introduced in the Clone Wars. She was rowdy, she was rambunctious, and she was not pleasant to listen to. She just was very rebellious, right? Now, while I believe she would have those tendencies still, I believe that in a way that she would try and be something that she's not. I think that she would be intimidated by Obi-Wan more than she was by Anakin. Now, Anakin is Anakin, I know, but I feel like Obi-Wan has such a calm and demands respect from his own demeanor that she would have tried to be something that she's not because she wanted to impress him. And I think that's where the relationship would begin, is Ahsoka trying to impress Obi-Wan, then realizing that she doesn't have to impress him, she just has to be herself. And herself is really a great Jedi, asking questions and being who she is. I think that their bond would have been legendary. I think their bond would have been very reminiscent of Anakin and Obi-Wan, or Anakin and Ahsoka. I think it would have been very, very tight. I think that they would have bonded really well over their time with one another, and I think that Ahsoka would have seen a lot of the diplomacy side of war that she didn't get with Anakin, because Anakin's not really a diplomat. He's I got a lightsaber and you don't, and that's usually how he works with it. Obi-Wan is very much so, I have a lightsaber, but we can talk about this. And that's kind of the difference here. Now, there's something I added into canon, into this own canon, and I want to talk about that real quick because I thought it was kind of cool. So, for those of you that don't know, George took a lot of influence from the Eastern spiritualities and regions, which would be Eastern as in China, Japan, those areas. And I took a word from the Chinese. I think it's Chinese. I don't know. I don't believe it's Mandarin. But it's Fanggu. It's Fangyu, and that just means defense in Chinese, not Mandarin. And I just added that on the end of the title for Form 5 because I thought that'd be kind of fun. A little Easter egg in there for probably the none of you that speak that language. But if you do, congratulations. But yeah, I thought that'd be a fun little Easter egg. But the reason I did that is because, well, Form 5 is already defensive. It already has implements of defense, but I believe that if Ahsoka was trained by the Master of Defense, she would have taken that and made Form 4 even more defensive, but she would have been even deadlier as an aggressor in that form. So in a way, it's like combining Form 3 and Form 4, I guess. But I wanted to change up her lightsaber style a little bit, but not too much, because I still think Ahsoka would be naturally geared towards aggression, but she would just be trained by somebody that uses defense. And that's kind of where I was at with that. As for the overall thematic devices of the story, I wanted to keep it rather simple, stupid with this one. I didn't want to go too deep into something, because honestly, the relationship is a basic master-apprentice relationship, and it grows into something more, and that's just through their encounters over the war, just like how Anakin and Ahsoka grow in canon. They just have to go through it, they have to be in it to get to what they have in the end. Or not really in the end, but you know what I mean. That kind of bond. I don't think Ahsoka would be leaving the Order. I don't think she'd even be around when the temple was bombed. I don't think Zurgu would be a part of that situation. So let's talk about Zurgu, and that's spelled Xerguu. Zurgu is our Ithorian Zabrak, and he comes in not because I wanted an Ex Machina, and I thought about that before I added him in. I was like, is he technically an Ex Machina? Not really. I believe that Anakin would find a way at some point to be like, yeah, I kind of want an apprentice. Ahsoka was forced onto him, but I believe him seeing the bond that would definitely grow between Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, I feel like he would feel the need to be a teacher. I feel like he would feel like, I think I should do this. You know, it might be impulsive, it might be something that he didn't really expect or think through, but I think he would do it at some point, and I think he would grow from training another student. Now, this isn't a story about Anakin training Zurgu. It's nothing like what we did with Anakin and Daisha's story, and that's a throwback for some of you longtime viewers, but it's something that I wanted to throw in there and let it be a part of the story and kind of naturally build, again, much like Ahsoka and Obi-Wan's relationship, as it naturally progresses and builds over different encounters that you kind of see them interacting in. Again, Mortis, the Citadel, Second Battle of Geonosis, that kind of thing, where Anakin and Zurgu have different elements where they get to bond over the course of the war, but we don't really see that because they're not the main focus of this video. The main focus and the main characters, protagonists, are Ahsoka and Obi-Wan. But I wanted that nice little parallel, and I think having Zurgu along with Fives and Tup would have helped end this more naturally. Originally, I was going to go with the Order 66 plan, but I wanted something more unique to happen, something different to happen. I kind of passed through Sidious's death. Again, he's the only villain we get, other than having to be able to write Plagueis in or do something else. He's the only villain we get in 9 movies, and yeah, I know, well, Legends or whatever, I base most of this stuff off of canon, unless I feel like throwing something Legends in, but he's the only villain we get for 9 movies. It's kind of hard to do the same villain over and over again, so if I seem like I rushed through Palpatine's death, it's because I don't want you guys to hear the same thing over again. Sometimes it's just hard to write something new for a death of a villain all the time. But I seriously hope you guys enjoyed this video. This was a lot of fun. This was one of the more fun stories that I've gotten to write lately. So I hope you all enjoyed this, and I hope you look forward to whatever the next video is. I don't know what it is yet at the moment, but by the time I'm finishing editing this, I will know. Anyways, I love you all. Spread the love. Don't forget to subscribe and share. And always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.